Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries. I'm John and this is Hannah.
Hi.
And all this month we're going to be looking at the various prompts for RPGaDay 2025. So let's get into it. Okay, so the prompt for day 12 is path. So Hannah, path, what are you thinking?
So, when you're telling a story, your characters are going along a path of some sort, almost every time. You're either looking at beginning, middle, end, that sort of a path in the story, or you're looking at the actual physical space that they're going through. And something that I was trying to think about was all the different ways you can describe that road that they're walking down.
So what we're talking about, the physical road, like the physical path?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll maybe get to the rest in a bit, see how long we've been recording for.
Okay.
But you've got everything from a dirt track through a forest to a huge highway, or even say an interstellar speedway. There's so many different ways you can describe a road, but 90% of the time in a D&D game, they're walking through the woods.
Okay, so taking that into account, if you were describing a path to someone in one of your games, what sort of things would you be describing to make it sound a bit more interesting? I mean, I know for every path you walk down, you're not going to give a massive 2-hour description or whatever, but what are a few things you might highlight to just sort of make it a bit more interesting?
So, for example, you might look at what kinds of players have you got in your party.
Okay.
Have you got a ranger? In which case, you're probably going to tell them a bit about the animal tracks that are along this way.
Strange folk.
Have you got a druid, or who you might tell a bit about the plants that are along the way, or however it works in whichever variation of the game systems you're using. Maybe your wizard notices that the stones have been made in an interesting manner.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'd like to sort of often call back to when talking about things like this is it's very easy to rely entirely on sight as the primary sense, because a lot of us do, to be perfectly honest. But obviously there's various other senses that you can also bring into play, and just sort of adding a couple of details to them can add a great deal of interest to your description. You can also use it to hint at what might occur further down the path. So just as a random stereotypical example, if our players are walking down the stereotypical forest path or whatever, and we know, there's a group of orc bandits in a clearing further down the path, they've got an encampment, you might say, in the distance you can smell the faint waft of smoke, and the players can go, all right, well, if there's smoke, it must either be a natural fire or there must be some people about. And you can reward the players who are paying attention by giving them that little bit of extra sensory information. And you can use the sense of touch, taste. I don't know, maybe you say your druid, maybe you spot some particular berries, and you just mention you see some berries off by the side of the path. He tastes them and you go, these berries, normally they'd be quite sweet in this season, but they appear to have been affected by it as though there was a great frost, but there wasn't a frost recently, and there's some ice monster down the way or whatever.
Similarly, I know you're a big fan of your fungi.
I am indeed.
Maybe you happen across this really rare magical fungi that's really useful to your player group. Thing is, it only grows on griffin droppings.
Oh, right, okay, I see.
Which means if there's some of it there, there's one of them nearby somewhere.
And there you go, that's Hannah's elevator pitch for the Pooh Hunters campaign. Coming soon to an RPG imaginary scenario near you. But no, all joking aside, I do see what you mean. Like I say, you can give an awful lot of information.
It only grows in kobold corpses.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things it also makes me think of when we're talking about paths, as well as literally the physical path that you're talking about, there's an element of paths representing like, the player choices, the decision points you can go for an adventure. You know, if you see a flow chart or something like that, technically the lines joining it up there, the paths. And if you think of a dungeon, that's all it really is. If you simplify it down, it's a flow chart. The corridors are the lines linking the boxes together, which are the rooms. You choose which line you follow down there. And one of the things that I've always liked about RPGs is the idea that the player character's choices are meaningful and they matter. And you'll hear people throwing around the term like quantum ogre a lot, you know, where like the GMs, for those of you who don't know, the GM, we'll keep it brief, the GM's decided that there's going to be an ogre down one of the paths, and whichever path you pick, left or right, that's the path that the ogre's going to be down, because that the GM wants you to face the ogre, which I'm not a big fan of, because it means the decision doesn't really matter. In that situation, don't bother having two paths, just have one path, and say like there's a path with an ogre on it. You've got the same amount of choice, there's not even the illusion of it. And some good GMs, like, you know, you can get away with making an illusion of choice even if there isn't any. But I always think, well, why bother? Just let the players like actually have a meaningful choice. And it might just be part of the way that I like to run my games. You know, the sort of OSR games I tend to run, where I like the hex crawl games, the point crawl games. But the thing I like about those is the players can just go, all right, we're going to head west of the town. What's to the west of it? And you sort of, especially if you're doing like a procedurally generated game, you discover that together as you go along, rather than me just having everything planned out and sort of forcing you down a very narrow route. Which, don't get me wrong, if you enjoy that sort of thing and it's all pre-planned, absolutely fine. And if it's a one-shot, fair enough. But if it's a campaign, I'd rather you be able to choose your own path. You know, like the old choose your own adventure books, where you get to choose which path your players want to go down, and that choice has some meaning. But in order to make a meaningful choice, you've got to have information to act upon. So in my very roundabout way, that circles back to what you were saying about paths where there can be like little bits of evidence about what's going to happen further down. Because if you have no way of deciding which path you should go down, then how are you going to make that choice? You need some evidence to base your choice on.
And it reminds me of the classic sketch where, I can't even remember who it was, they're walking through the forest, it comes to the two roads. One of the roads has the happy music and the sunshiny lighting.
Yeah.
The other road has the scary music and the spooky lighting. And it doesn't mean there's not something nasty waiting down the sunshiny road.
No.
But even just that little bit of description lets your players feel like they've made a proper choice when they've made that choice.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I know it's not quite so necessary in games that are, in inverted commas, more balanced in terms of like combats, but if you're in like an OSR game where there doesn't tend to be a lot of balance, you really need to be sort of telegraphing some of that danger level before the player characters get to that point in the path, because it seems like quite horrible, and rightly so, quite unfair, if you're just walking down a path, suddenly out of nowhere, boom, an ogre like grabs you and like thrashes you into a tree, you're dead. Whereas if you're walking down a path and so like 15 minutes before you get to the ogre, the druid's like, oh, that's like some ogre droppings here or whatever. Or you can hear the bellowing sound of like ogres in the distance. Then you as a player can go, and your player characters can go, oh, do we think we're like tough enough to take on these ogres? How many does it sound like there are? Oh, one, yeah, we could probably take one ogre. Oh no, it sounds like there's like three of them. I'm not sure we can handle this. And you can then make that choice of, do we like turn around and go back, like maybe get some mates from the town to come and help us, or do we carry on? But at least you've made that decision. It's not just a case of like, the ogres grab me, I'm dead. So that's it from me and Hannah for this RPGaDay 2025 episode.
Bye.
Hopefully you'll join us in the next one. And until we see you again, take care, stay safe, and whenever you're playing, have fun.